Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this month's Dean's Conversation Series, featuring one of our really dynamic alums, Donsia Strong Hill. I met Donsia not quite a year ago, up in Milwaukee, and she was just so amazing. I was like, you need to come to Chicago and talk to our students about your career, which has been so varied and amazing. And as you know, in these, I don't do a formal introduction. I kick it off with a question, so the guest ends up pretty much introducing herself. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit about where you grew up, how you decided to go to law school, how you picked John Marshall, and then sort of trace us through the outlines of your career.
Okay.
Which I know could take the full hour, but
I will not do that. But I saw some other students here. Did they leave and go away, or are they coming back?
I'm hoping they'll come back.
Okay. So I grew up here in Chicago. I am a product of Chicago Public Schools. I went to Lynn Bloom and was not really sure what I wanted to do after high school. Went to Illinois State and finished and worked in merchandising and retail fashion, and was bored out of my mind. And so it's one of those things where you decide that you like something, but you don't think about what does that mean day to day. And I had an aunt who was a flight attendant, so I became a flight attendant. We had a strike in the 80s, that's all I'll say. And I need a certain level of control. And because I chose not to cross the picket line, I couldn't come back to work when everybody else went. So I thought, okay, this is probably not the career for me, needing the control that I do. And so I had already taken the LSAT when I had left undergrad. And so I started applying to schools, and I was looking for one that would allow me to continue to work because I was going to put myself through. And so John Marshall was the perfect fit. At that point, I was just talking to the dean, there were 3 sections you could be a part of. There was the morning section, there was an afternoon section that started about 1 or 2, and then there was an evening session. And so I could fly in the morning, do a turn around or something like that, and then come back for class, and I'd come rolling in with my stew bag and change in the bathroom and then go to class from there. Growing up, I wanted to be a nurse, and I don't know, I think I liked the idea of being a nurse. The one summer I worked in the renal dialysis unit, and I fainted, so that was not going to work. So I had uncles that were lawyers, who are lawyers, and I think that was what gave me the idea that I should do that. But I remember growing up, my grandfather was a pretty active minister on the South Side. There's a street named after him, Reverend Jethro Gales. And he had Eartha Kitt come to town to speak at the church. And when she talked about the way that her career had been put on hold and the blackballing of her for some of what she had said to the president's wife, which was, just speaking her truth. I was 8 or 9, but I was truly offended by that. And so I knew that I wanted to help people and help people speak truth to power then.
And what did you do after law school? Walk us through that part of your career.
So, when I came to law school, remember, I want to help people. So I'm a nurse, and I'm going to speak truth to power. And so I was going to be a juvenile public defender. I saw my essay I wrote. What I didn't realize then that I now know and accept is I am very competitive. And so the students who were doing well were all looking at corporate, and they were looking at clerkships and things like that. And that was something I never wanted to do. I wanted to be a juvenile public defender. And so I had graded onto the Software Law Journal, and it was the new journal at that point. And it wasn't clear if the top 15%, if you had to be top 15 of your class or the overall class to grade onto law review. I didn't fight that, but I was asked to join the Software Law Journal. And from there, I was able to get a internship from a Dallas law firm to do oil and gas and corporate finance work. So that's what I was thinking. I would go and do that. And wound up getting an offer and going back. So I was the only African American in the firm. This is 1988, the summer.
No, we figured out we overlapped in Dallas.
Yes, we did. So I'm there, and by the time I come back the next year, there were 5 other people there. And so I went back and did corporate finance, and then the recession happened. So we had 2 things that happened. We had the changing of the tax law, which was the 87 Act, and then there was a recession. So no longer were people issuing a lot of debt because the rules had changed, the game had changed. But then also, when there's a recession, there's not a lot of liquidity in the market. And so I started doing public finance instead of corporate finance. Really loved it. It felt more at home, more comfortable. Corporate finance is you're raising money for corporations. You're selling stock, you're issuing I was helping to write prospectuses. In public finance or municipal finance, you're issuing bonds and other debt instruments for municipalities, states, government, and you issue official statements. So I became, in between that summer and finishing law school, Professor Mott became my best friend and professor and was really helpful in the work that I wanted to do. When I got ready to finish, so then I got the political bug, and Richards ran for governor. I worked on her campaign raising money and decided, yeah, I should be doing something different. And I could not get a date in Dallas also. So I went to DC, and the partner of my firm, he was Obama's trade rep, Ron Kirk, helped me get interviews with folks that he knew. And in DC, it's all about who you know. You can walk around, you can send resumes forever. It is really, somebody has to vouch for you. And to me, that's okay because it's Chicago. Don't send me nobody that ain't been sent. So it was that going there. So I wound up working for my my congressman, Congressman John, I'm missing his name right now, but I worked for him as his staff counsel and then went over to Judiciary Committee. And I started work the week that the hearings for Clarence Thomas were. So it could not have been a headier experience. Here I am, this young, feisty, sort of feminist, and there are people really having it out about who's telling the truth, Anita Hill or Clarence Thomas. And so John Bryant was a real liberal, blue dog Democrat from Dallas, was on the Judiciary Committee. And so while the Senate holds hearings, the House Judiciary Committee at that point was run by Jack Brooks, who thought that he had jurisdiction over the entire world of law. Judiciary means everything that is run or involves the law. And John Dingell, who recently died from Michigan, had energy and commerce in his mind. Anything that happened in the world involved commerce. And so they would have these dueling hearings. But this was the one area, Senate confirmation, that neither one of them had anything to say because it was the House and not the Senate. So that was starting there. I worked on product liability reform. I worked on immigration. I worked on compacts between states and Indian tribes. And that was and campaign finance and lobbying reform. So we wrote the lobbying reform law to be the companion in the House to the law for the Senate. And at that point, President Clinton had been elected. And John Bryant said, well, I'm not introducing a bill unless those guys say that they're for it. Because they'll tell you they're for it, but then they'll be against it. So it was my job to get support from the White House to say that they would come and introduce this bill with them. And so using my connections and who I have been in touch with, we had somebody from our office, John Bryant, who went to work on the campaign in the war room. And I worked with him to be in touch with the people in the White House to really try to get the support. So we were finally able to get them to say, yes, they would support the bill. And then we put together a introduction press release. And Senator Cohen from Michigan was the Senate sponsor, and John Bryant, Levin or Cohen? Senator Levin was the senator from Michigan, and John Bryant had the House bill. And so Vice President Gore came and introduced this, and so I've got my pictures of that whole happening. And then about a month later, the White House called Bruce Reed and asked if I would call and come over for an interview. And so I was like, okay, when? First I said, no, I'm really not interested. I just want to stay in Congress. It'll be fun to finally work with an administration that is Democratic. And at that point, William Barr was the Attorney General. So how old am I? I mean, he's back again. So, and there were lots of folks who were coming. There were a lot of immigration issues. We can talk about that later. So I had experience from working in Congress that the people who had come up with Bill Clinton from Arkansas didn't have. I had experience and had relationships on the Hill that he had not. So that was really useful and helpful. They were focused on healthcare, but if anything else happened, because I had worked in the expansive Judiciary Committee, I could either reach out to folks or I had some interaction on that. One of the areas I worked on in the White House beyond immigration was Indian Affairs. I met someone there. Ultimately, I went over to work for Department of Energy because I had a really good friend who was in charge of Africa for Department of Energy. Now, I'm domestic policy, right? I don't know anything about international except what I may have taken in some class. But this guy believed that I had the skills and he had seen my work ethic and thought I could be helpful for the work that he was doing. So I went over to be his senior advisor. I was there a year, worked on electrification for South Africa right after Mr. Mandela became president, and did a couple trips planning trips in South Africa to get ready for the president to come over. So my job was to find projects that we could finance and fund from the U.S. government, Department of Energy, partners who could actually make things happen. We were really interested in solar, it was called photovoltaic then, and also looking for projects that involved empowering women. I left, got married, and moved to the Oneida Indian Reservation, and I lived there and raised my sons. While there, I worked as an assistant DA, started out as part-time for the juvenile area, heartbreaking work, working with children in need of protection services and delinquents. And what I found were they were really strict and tough. And I thought, you're taking kids, I said in court because I have no filter, you're taking children out of court, you're taking children out of houses, out of their homes for throwing a bottle. I mean, I grew up in Inglewood and Greater Grand Crossing and then Hyde Park. You need to do a whole lot more than that. That's not something. And then I left from that and went more folks. I was a third working, and then I went to a half-time. And domestic violence, remarkably same families. I would see the families that I had worked with in juvenile that I then worked with who were victims of domestic violence and whatever. And being an African-American person working in a court where most of the people were people of color, it was really hard and it was distressing. And there's nothing like sitting at the prosecutor's table and have people come into court and call you a sellout. And what they don't know is people of color who work in the system really keep the system fair. We need people on both sides, people who have the experience of people who are coming to court and understand what that looks like. So if you called somebody the N-word, I wasn't charging you because I know that they're my fighting words. So yeah, watch what you say. I would fight with my boss because I also was assigned to bad checks. And to me, bad checks is just collections for vendors or liquor stores. And when I bounced a check, the bank called me, hey, Ms. Hill, your account is in the negative. They never say you bounced the check, your account is in the negative. Some nice euphemism. And then I get a chance to transfer money and fix it. These poor people would have money where they would cash a check or buy some liquor and cash a check, and then those liquor stores would bring the checks to John. Well, John was an elected DA, so that mattered to him. But I felt like people were being treated differently based on their economic circumstance, and that was troubling to me. I left that work and started a consulting firm with my husband, and then got asked to do a bond deal. The Packers were expanding their stadium, and in their law, the law of Wisconsin required there to be minority and women lawyers on this municipal finance work. So this was work that I had done, remember, down in Dallas 10 years ago. And people in the law firm that was doing the work remembered that I had done that, and they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I said, yeah, no, not really. I like this fighting stuff I'm doing. And then my husband had a heart attack. And so I started thinking, well, how would I take care of these kids if he died? I'm here in a place where I don't have any family. So then when they asked again, I said yes, I would do it. And so I worked on the expansion of the Packer Stadium. I think it was over $200 million in financing. Some tax-exempt bonds, which means the interest is exempt from your income, and some taxable bonds, which give you a higher rate, and those are for luxury things that you can't issue tax-exempt. So the suites, those are not financed with tax-exempt money. You have to pay interest on those. So I finished that, and then the governor, we had a Democrat elected, and he asked me to come and run one of the agencies. So I ran the agency for everybody to need a license. So from hairdressers to the medical board. And I went around on my visits to the legislature, and one of the guys said, you know, that could be a very powerful agency within the right person's hands, and just remembered that. And so we made a couple of laws and wrote some opinions and really changed some of the way that things were happening in Wisconsin. One of the things I'm most proud of doing, and really pissed the dentist off, is I wrote an opinion. My general counsel wrote an opinion for me. So if you are a member of the practice group, you have a license from the dentistry board, you are governed by that board. It's always self-regulating, like lawyers, we're self-regulating. But if you do that work and you don't have that license, then the secretary of the department, you come before her or him as the authority. And so the dentist, some years ago, there was a law that was passed that said in a public health setting, hygienists can do A, B, C, and D. All the stuff that when we go get our teeth cleaned, yeah, they can do all that. Except when they actually tried to do it, then the dentistry board sent out a letter saying, yeah, no, that's not the real law. That's not really how this works. And you really have to have a dentist to write a prescription and be on site and this whole list of stuff. So what it really wound up doing is disenfranchising poor people from getting health care or dental care. So one of the secretaries said to me, you know, this is costing us a lot of money. We're missing out on reimbursement. And the reason that you need a license in the medical field is so you can get reimbursed from that for insurance. The reason you need that is because they want to limit access. And the reason that health professionals want to have licensure is because they want competence, but also it limits the pool of people that can do the work. So that was what I figured out in my time there working with her and the insurance guy. So she said, you know, I can't get reimbursed. We got $4 million that we're leaving on the table. And all I can think about is having a toothache. And if you're a baby or a kid who's got a toothache, what does that feel like? So we wrote an opinion that said in a public health setting, we believe that this law is right, and we're interpreting it to mean that hygienists do in fact have this authority and they have the ability to do this work. And that's the end of it, and we won't be bringing any more cases against hygienists who do this. That just really knocked the socks off the dentists because they were pretty powerful. The Speaker of the House was like Madigan, and that was his best friend since kindergarten, the head of the dentistry board. So that did not, and steer me to them. And then the one other thing we found was an independent scope of practice for nurses, which meant they didn't need doctors in order to work. And my idea there was they could open clinics in neighborhoods on storefronts, and people would have different access, nurse practitioners. Voila, down the road, I don't want to take all the credit, Walgreens, where you go in for $80, right? Or $40? Yeah, but that was not my vision. My vision was small storefront kind of thing.
Wow.
So that was regular licensing. Then I had my own practice. I was partner in a big law firm, but I didn't have access to the clients, so that only lasted a while. And then when my kids went off to school, high school, then I decided to go back, and I really wanted to remake what my practice and what my life would look like. And I got a master's in public administration with a focus on nonprofit management. And so I managed the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which is not really practicing law.
Well, tell us what you're doing at LISC.
The Local Initiative Support Corporation was founded.
And this is up in Milwaukee, if anyone came.
And there's one here, and Megan Hart runs it here. And I think she's a lawyer too. It was founded 40 years ago by the Ford Foundation when a program officer, and program officers are just people who give money to nonprofits. They make the determination. So a program officer was asked by a trustee, if you had money, $25 million, how would you use it? And he said, I'd set up an organization that would serve as the intermediary between corporate giving and grant making and grassroots organizations who, after urban renewal, remember all these ugly buildings we got and the slum clearing, and then we got a bunch of concrete things, the way Kennedy King used to look, all of that. Neighbors were not consulted in that, and so they rose up and really took back their power and insisted that if you're going to do something in our neighborhood, nothing for us without us. So don't do for me without me. Don't speak for me, help me speak for myself. So that's what LISC does, and I run the Milwaukee office to do that. We have invested about $150 million in Wisconsin, leveraging about $450 million. We provide early stage financing for projects that would not otherwise get done, low income housing, tax credit housing. So housing where there's a cap on how much you pay for your rent. And also we invest in community centers. I provide grants to folks. And I do that by applying for grants myself. So I apply for grants, and then I grant it and provide technical assistance to community groups. I'm a little different because I like to get stuff done, and if your group is too small, my community is suffering so much, I need scale. So I recently worked with my team to get a $3.5 million grant from Chase. There are only 4 that were given this year, and it's the Chase Pro Neighborhoods grant. And we are working to build small businesses. We have to create and help support 40 small businesses, so many million foot of space. And the reason that I was interested in doing this is I wanted to be able to have money available to invest in returning citizen businesses, because when men come back into their community and they can't work and they can't support their families, there's a dysfunction there that it's hard to overcome. But if you can invest in them and their own businesses and they have great ideas, I wish I had brought a letter where they read about the things that we're doing and they write me and ask, I'm really thinking about, I got my plan for this bakery I want to do when I'm done, and it's what is needed in the community, and it just gives me such joy. And I know that if people are given a chance and the proper training, we can really change community.
Beyond the Chase project, any other big projects going on right now?
Yeah, so I'm really interested. I'm not a socialist, I don't think, but I love worker co-ops. And I think that they can transform community as well, because as we have all of these businesses, baby boomers who are transitioning out, they don't want the small manufacturing entities anymore. We don't have anybody to take those over. So if we can have community folks who can work there, we can pull together the money and the financing, the capital stacks that would support something like that, then these people can own these businesses in their community that have been stalwarts there, and we can continue to support living wages and stabilize our communities.
And for the students who don't know, our Business Enterprise Law Clinic is changing its name to Community Enterprise and Solidarity Economy Clinic.
Love it.
And Renee Hatcher's main area of interest is in workers' co-op law. So if that's something that interests you, you can do that right here at John Marshall now.
Yay. I got to come and talk with them.
Absolutely. I was just thinking we need to find Professor Hatcher. I think she's in the other lunch, but maybe we can do a little intro at the end. Well, let's turn back to John Marshall days.
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about some of your favorite memories at John Marshall.
So I had Professor Beshley, and he would go, "Ms. Strong." And he became a great supporter. When I got ready to go back to graduate school, I applied. So if you've already got a law degree, you're going to get another degree. You got to go somewhere people are going to pay attention to it, right? So I only applied to Ivy League, and I was going to go back to the East Coast. I'm divorced now. And so he wrote so many recommendations, like 6 schools. Who does that? He was amazing. And then Professor Mott, because I wanted to do corporate because I was competitive, it wasn't in my heart, but you know, if you're on a journal and if you don't move court and you're vice president, yeah, you should be doing one of these big corporate jobs. And I did it for 3 years. Well, here I am 22 years later, I haven't been back. Professor Canderas, so were you guys, I wonder if they were here. He had us read this book, and it is a fabulous book, The Disaster at Buffalo Creek. And it is so he's shaking his head. This mining story, this whole area is washed away. And I mean, they fight like dogs. They have every motion you have ever seen. And so there were like 4 that the book doesn't exactly tell you what it was. And I found those 4 situations. I named I had a study group, and we're all still friends. And we live all over the country, and I have visited many of them. There were 4 things that weren't named. I had named everything else, had outlined it. Here's this motion on this page, here's this at this stage, but there were 4. And so I proceeded to go through when we had our review for Canderas before the final. He goes, and I asked him everything that was cloudy. He said, you know what? But for the fact that I have not written down the final, I would have sworn you had stolen it. Because I asked every one of those questions, and so it wound up being a harder test because of me, because he had to find something else to do. But that was really quite lovely. And so my strategy for constitutional law, anybody, is to just dump. I wrote everything Palleli had ever said. I just dumped everything. Substantive due process and procedural due process. And it just went all the way through.
Any valuable lessons learned from law school other than what to do on the con law exam?
You have to do your own outlines. I'm in favor of gathering outlines from a lot of people and seeing, but it is when you make the outline that the curriculum becomes your own. But just studying from somebody, that will not help you. And that is what I did also for the bar, is you do your own outlines, your own kind of work. Something I wish I'd done in law school is take more classes that were outside of what I thought I wanted to do. I'm trying to figure out how to, once you go through a divorce, you realize I was going into surgery on February 20th, and I was also getting my house refinanced. And they asked for a statement of my savings. So I, go to print it out, and I realized this joker's name is still there. So if I die, he is going to have all the money. So then I'm like, oh my God, how did I do this? I transferred it all into my checking account. So it's just sitting there. But now I'm trying to figure out for my kids how to do a trust. And now trusts are expensive. And as I read it, it's the same document, but you've got to get somebody to service it every year. So I wish I had taken classes like that were outside of what I thought I wanted. I took, what's Ann's last name?
Lucine?
Judge. No. She's not a judge anymore in Seventh Circuit, but she taught me trial advocacy.
Ann Claire Williams.
Oh, God. She was amazing, but I came flouncing in, sort of like, happy-go-lucky, and she would tape us. And I could not, she really critiqued me hard. You don't look professional, because it's in an off time, right? You guys still have it in between classes?
We do the accelerated trial ad.
Yes.
At a separate time.
So I've come in my jeans, and I used to wear like flannel shirts. I was totally not dressed up. And she says, when you're an advocate, when you're doing appellate work, somebody's life is really on the line. And it was that really sort of shocked me, and I really took it more seriously. And the next time she taped me, I was completely ready, voice modulating, able to tell the story, able to hit my points within the time limit. And then what I hear on my thing is, excellent, well done. I still have that VHS tape.
You've had an amazing career. What about some more general pieces of advice for our students?
Be prepared to say yes. So as I described the work that I did, the first job I actually looked for was the one I have now. So showing up, doing good work, being accountable, being prepared to back up what you say, to argue succinctly, to write well. And that's the thing that I think that we really do a good job here is the writing program. The way that you have to do the 3 classes. So because I did the law journal, I only had to do 1, but the repetitive writing, it is so valuable. When I would get things from other students coming to law clerk at the firm, the writing was lazy and not precise, not succinct. I cannot help but edit anything that comes before me. So being prepared to say yes, but you also have to then know what's in your heart, so that when you are ready to follow your heart, you've made the money you need, you are ready to really make a difference, you can go and do that too.
Who are some of your role models, and why were they your role models?
So Eartha Kitt, I talked about her. I never thought about my own mother as a role model, but now being a single parent, and with so many more resources and so much more experience, my mother was a teenage mom finishing high school, married to another person finishing high school, and all that they had to do living on 64th and Union. I have so much more appreciation for her resilience than I had before. Women who help other women is another group of folks that I really admire. I think Madeleine Albright said it well, women who don't help other women, there's a special place in hell for them. And then I had a chance to work with Barbara Jordan when I worked for the White House. Oh my God.
Okay, we probably need to tell some of the people in the audience who Barbara Jordan was.
Barbara Jordan was the first Black woman legislator from Texas, and she was assigned to the Judiciary Committee, and during the Watergate hearings, she was the one who gave that powerful speech in this really deep bass voice, and President Clinton appointed her as somebody to address the immigration issue. Immigration issues have been around. I completely understand what is going on at the border. During our time, ships were coming over from China, and I would get called. I was part of a team, there were 3 of us, who would get calls at night from the Coast Guard to say, we have a situation, we have a vessel, and then I have to ask the question, women and children, what is the state of it, all of that. So here I am, about 30, with that kind of power to say whether they could come into the US or not. So she was named to be a chair of a task force of a commission that would work on taking testimony around the country and thinking about what was needed on immigration. And I was assigned to work with her and to go with her to these different hearings. So having dinner with her on 3 separate occasions, just she and me, and by this time she was in a wheelchair and hadn't attended. She just gave really incredible advice. She says, Donsia, hone your craft. Don't be a flim-flam making your way through just based on who you know and what you know, but actually hone your craft. And so this is the advice that I pass to you. Do what you do and do it well, and you'll be respected for that. And I had so in the Clinton Library, it's digitized now, there is a letter that she sent to him talking about how well I helped her. I know, so like, Barbara, would you have thought that about me?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. But what are some skills that law students need to gain if they truly want to effectuate social change?
You have to find your own voice. And it's not the person who gets called on every day by the professor who sits in the front and pontificates every class. But it is the 1 or 2 areas that you really care about, that you really want to go deep in, and be prepared to speak authoritatively, to stand up and speak with knowledge, but also to be able to speak with conviction. That's really important. Some of the times I walk in a room and it is only because I truly believe in what I'm doing and the mission of what we're doing that I am able to convince folks that my organization or my way or our suggestion is the way of doing it. And so I'm saying to you, every opportunity to take some kind of public speaking class, participatory, do that. Learn to study and work with people in a group. It's great to be able to do this by yourself. Self-work does not exist anymore. You really have to be able to work collaboratively. Most of the projects I work on are collaborative work. John Marshall is known for his public interest work, and your ability to really work with people, and it will jogging your memory and coming up with creative solutions is not something you do by yourself. It's something that you do by having conversations, and something will come up. So those are the things that I would suggest. Practice talking to yourself in the mirror. I mean, that whole moot court thing, that's a real thing. And the advocacy classes, you have more opportunity to get better by doing those.
Questions? We have a mic. I know someone has a question. There we go.
Lamar 3L. My question is, how do you keep yourself balanced with all the stuff that you do? I know it's kind of hard to manage kids.
Lamar, I have not done a good job of doing that. That's why I recently had surgery. It is not easy. Yeah, it's not easy. I did not do a really good job. When I was raising my kids, I basically shut down volunteering and being involved with a lot of other stuff. And so I worked out of my house. When I first started doing public finance, you met and you all had these drafting sessions together. Thankfully, those don't happen. So it's real when you see people with pajama bottoms on and a shirt on top. Yeah. So I worked out of my dining room while my kids were in elementary and middle school. But that meant that I couldn't really volunteer in the community because I had to be available to run those gym shoes that they inevitably leave at home, or wanting to be there to have the meeting with the teacher, and I would have a big piece of notebook paper. Do not talk when you come in because I'm on a conference call. But I would have, snacks and stuff set out and have the door closed. So I think if I could advise you guys, I'm now like doing mindful app, and I get up in the morning and I do 3 pages of journaling every morning, 6 o'clock. But I've only been doing that for 2 weeks. But because I just had a surgery that was pretty significant, but because of the level of stress and the impact on my body. So I'm saying to you guys now, get in the habit of taking care of you now. And who your life partner is will impact how far you can go and how enjoyable your life is. So choose well.
Is there a question up here? Let's get the mic.
Hi, Danielle. It's a spider bite, if anybody was assumption. My question, you have such a diverse background. How do you maintain a focus area and have been able to kind of get back to where you were from not originally starting there?
So I was really intentional about this. All the other ones was being prepared to say yes and saying yes. And so none of those jobs lasted longer than 4 years, except my own firm. And that was because I was raising kids on an Indian reservation as the only Black lawyer in a county of 200,000. And so I had my own firm, and my partner was here in Chicago. So I was really able to focus a long time because I had to. And so I am determined, and that's just, growing up. In 4th grade, Mrs. Bonet at John Harvard School on 75th and Harvard told me, when you start something, you finish it. And so I've written stories about her and her impact on me, but just being prepared to say yes. But when I was ready to pivot, to come back to my core and what I really felt, and I felt like I had made enough money for rich white guys, and the poor people living in the communities deserved the opportunity to have the benefit of somebody who was going to care about them in the same creative and really hard-driving, transformative way. So I'm about transforming community for the people that are there.
Thank you. This was so interesting. My name is Jolietta, and I'm a 1L. I just started, so
Don't apologize.
bear with
Just
me.
work hard.
So I had the pleasure of going to Grit and Grace Day and seeing Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton speak recently. And she was talking about hearing someone from the reentry population say that they had come from prison, gone to prison, and went back into prison. Speaking of their experience of coming out of prison and coming back home and just being back into a situation that felt like prison again. And so when you talk about working with the reentry population and creating sustainable, jobs for them, I'm just curious, what is your plan? What are you looking to create as far as jobs for your reentry? And maybe I misunderstood as you lean forward. But I'm curious about how you plan to create something for the reentry population as far as jobs with the money that you receive from Chase that is going to be sustainable. Because what I find often is when you talk about nothing, for us, without us, how do you get perspective about profitability, right, for these areas involving reentry population that creates something sustainable? So I'm curious about your innovative ideas with that. Thank you.
So I'm trying to create opportunities for reentering citizens to own businesses, either as worker co-ops or as for-profit businesses owned small businesses. And we operate, so what you need training on how to run a business. You have an idea where you want to have a bakery. You may have learned the most incredible baking skills. You may have baked for the warden and have the most incredible recipes, and it's all delicious. You have to know how to manage your books. You have to know how to manage your money. You have to know how to manage your time. And as Lamar said, you have to know how to balance. So we have something that are called financial opportunity centers. these are places, and you have them here, you have 10 of them here in Chicago, at least, Chicago LISCAS. Those are places where you get job training because you're connected with a community-based organization. You get financial literacy, and you also get credit repair counseling. I want to take that a step further and have it available for those who are trying to open a business, so it's more like a business wraparound support entity, so that you understand that when you are borrowing money, it has to be paid back. It has to be paid back at this amount of interest on these days. Help them set up the technology so it gets paid at the right time. Help them understand that your personal finances impact your business finances. So a lot of these guys who I grew up with who went away to prison for selling drugs were math whizzes. They could count and they had photographic memories. They never wrote down a telephone number. So there are some skills there. It is just transitioning those skills for good. And to be able to stake a business with equity money, because our community doesn't have a lot of money. The whole generational poverty and the inability to quite catch up for a myriad of reasons is real. So having money available that can help stake these businesses and having commercial kitchen space available so they don't have to have their own kitchen space. They can go there, cook, have some place to sell it to, restaurants that will take it, and then the ability to grow from there. And it's incremental growth. But the pride that comes with having your own business, there's nothing like it. It's something that you create and that you're responsible for. You're about that. Worker co-ops is the ability to work cooperatively with others to do something. So you don't have to worry about all of that by yourself. Cooperative is making decisions as a team. So we have a number of entities that we're trying to shepherd through a worker co-op curriculum so that they can then become owners. They're now working as employees, but this entity is ready to spin them off as their own thing. So we need them to understand what it means to work cooperatively, what it means to share resources, what it means to make decisions that are for the benefit of everybody that are involved. And so having that community is really important, that nucleus of folks that you're working with. The choirs that we're accustomed to in our community work well because they work well because it's a group of people. I also run a program, or my organization runs a program that creates minority developers, and we do it as a cohort. I was in the first class. Cohorts matter because you have people that you can work with, people that you can draw upon, and this Horatio Alger stuff is just that stuff. Not everybody can pull themselves up by their bootstrap alone. You need people to rely on and to ask who's had a different experience than yours and actually, draw upon that. So that's how we think that we'll be able to create it and sustain it. We're not trying to create 50. We want to have 5. Show that it works, nurture it, get the contracts in restaurants and hotels that will create a sustainable flow of money so that they can go from there. I get really wound up when I'm talking about that.
While we see if anyone else has a question, is there a book that you've read that's impacted your thinking or your life that you could share something about?
Yes. So I just finished Becoming. I didn't read the last 2 paragraphs. I felt like, I know what happened. But that was really enjoyable. And I felt like, oh my gosh, she's talking about all the stuff I know about. Yes, I remember that, blah, blah. So that was really good, and it was great.
And that's Michelle Obama's book, just in case
Becoming,
someone...
Yes, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I thought it was really helpful for her to talk about the imposter syndrome. I cannot tell you how many rooms I've been in when I felt that. And I know I sit here seemingly confident and assured, but being in the law firm and it was just me, or being in a county and it's 200,000 lawyers and it's just me. Those are all places where imposter syndrome can show up and you lack confidence in your ability, and so you become a little more abrasive, a little short, because you're afraid of people asking you questions about who you are and what you do. The other book I read that I really enjoyed was The Color of Law, written by Professor Rothstein. And we had him as a speaker. So we had a citywide book read, 60 book groups reading and discussing, because I really feel strongly that if we're really going to talk about segregation and why our cities look the way they do, then we need to understand how we got this way. And I needed the people that I work with, and I work in deep communities in Milwaukee that look like Lawndale, Austin, Auburn. I needed them to understand that this was not their fault. They didn't create this situation, that this was orchestrated by the government, no less, and that it was supported by private sector banking. And having him come and speak and explain was thrilling. So I was telling the dean, you can't be with me and not like be about me. So I had my boyfriend get this on Audible, because he is a snowplow driver and highway guy, to hear it on Audible. So we could talk about it, and I was like, oh, did you see what happened? Did you see what happened with the projects in St. Louis? They had one for black people and one for white people, and the black people had a waiting list even when their white one was empty. Just being able to talk about that was so amazing. But to also understand that it went beyond, what we all know about, but the fact that even when people of color moved places to get work, they wouldn't let them live around the places where the work was happening. And so they formed housing co-ops, because they could then just make their own rules. So housing co-ops, I'm all about that too, for that. And we are working to create that, because it will create an opportunity for home ownership that's different than single family home ownership, because I hate going to Home Depot every weekend. And I'm just thinking about people who have less than I have, and the ability and the willingness to fix up every weekend. My God. You guys are so lucky here with all the cooperative housing that exists. We have 2 in Milwaukee, and they're both like hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can get in a co-op here, $10,000. My mother lives in a co-op. It's fabulous. I want that for Milwaukee.
Any final questions from the audience? Any final pieces of wisdom for our students?
I love what Lamar asked me about balance. And now so I'm 58, having come back through all this, and finally to the point where I feel like I'm living intentionally and taking time to think. And, I hear the air coming out here. I hear the car going. In the morning when I'm writing, I am listening for the birds. I feel more connected to myself, and that is, I wish I had this earlier in my life, so I offer that to you. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And if any of you want to come up and say hello, please do. Thank you for being here.